Hey, welcome to the Richey Mortgage Podcast, sponsored by and furnished by the Velocity team at Click and Close. I've got a very, 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 very special guest, and I don't use the word very lightly on this one because it's my dad, Gary Richey, who is a pioneer in the real estate mortgage business, real estate industry. And I've literally been trying to get this guy on the podcast for about 2 years now, and fortunately for Nuff, he's actually slowed down with his many responsibilities to take a little time to visit with us. So, Gary, aka Dad, thank you for joining us, and thanks for being here.
Well, I'm honored to be here and finally get to sit down and take the time and share a few things with you. You and I have had multiple conversations over the years, and hopefully we can catch up on some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have a little bit more extended podcast this time because obviously you have a wealth of knowledge and just so many good nuggets to share with the audience that I feel like we'd be doing everyone a disservice if we didn't go long. So let's just start off with the basic questions, man. Tell us about yourself, where you came from, and more importantly, how did you get into real estate in general? Because, you got into real estate in like 1977 or 78, right?
Right. I was officially licensed in 1978. And in fact, my license just renews in October. But I kind of joined this company in 1978 based on a friend of mine. And of course, he and some of his family members have, gone on to their ultimate reward. But, I was working with a guy by the name of Tim Hager, and he and I were, palling around and doing something. We worked for the same furniture rental company back in the 70s. People would move into an apartment and they'd be relocating, and maybe they had a car packed full of stuff, but no furniture. So we had a showroom in North Dallas, right off of Welch Road. And, we rented entire apartments full of furniture. Tim and I worked together as outside sales reps. We called on real estate, investors, property managers, and on-site apartments. So we were already in kind of sales. And Tim was one of those guys that could sell ice cream to Eskimos and tell them it was a new thing. So his mom and his dad opened a small, real estate office in Richardson, Texas, because they were natives to Richardson. Tim was born there, and it was about 1 block away from the Richardson City Hall, at Arapahoe and Custer.
Yep.
And it was just a little storefront, and his mom was the broker. His dad was a sales manager. They had about 10 agents. And he said, man, you need to get your real estate license because, my mom and dad are killing it. There's people just standing in line waiting to buy houses. And I said, yeah. Well, I went on ahead and enrolled with a real estate back in 78. All you had to do is basically have 90 hours of core classroom instruction, and then you could sit and apply and pass your test. Now, the test was a little different back then. It was very long, manual. You had to go to the University of Arlington, University of Texas at Arlington, and sit in this room full of about 300 or 400 people. But what happened is I passed my test, and, I was fortunate. And this is something very few people know, but a real estate education back then was a little bit more casual and less regulated as it is now. But one of my instructors was a guy by the name of Judge Fight, who was an icon. He really truly was a judge, and he founded the Judge Fight Century 21 franchise.
Yep.
So he was one of my instructors for 2 of my classes, and his vast legal knowledge and wisdom and practical application really influenced me a lot. And so I passed my test, got into the real estate business, and found out, wow, this is really a lot of fun. This is back in the days when mortgage officers would come into your office and sponsor happy hours and
Right.
Title companies were always having parties. New builders would throw these lavish banquets and give away free trips to Europe and things like that. And I said,
Right.
I have hit the mother load.
Right.
So I was there for about 2 or 3 months, hadn't sold a damn thing, and gained 15 pounds because I was always happy houring and feasting.
Right.
So Tim and I decided we better get with it. And so back at that day and age, I had another friend of mine, was my first buyer client. His name was Chad Whitmire. And Chad and his lovely bride, Susan, were looking to buy their first home. And this is early in 1978. So what happened is I showed them several homes, so forth and so on. And they settled on a really nice Fox and Jacobs over in an area just south of Arapahoe, and Arapahoe and Coit, but it was a little out of their price range. So we moved over further to Garland, to Jupiter and Arapahoe. And in fact, they bought a house probably in the same neighborhood where I had a couple of rental properties. And so this was back when those Fox and Jacobs homes were entry level.
Right.
I think they paid $61,500 for a 2,100 square foot home that was really, really nice. And, they had some help with financing from Susan's dad. And Susan says, well, you probably would be really motivated to meet my dad. I'd love my mom and dad to meet you. And I said, well, why don't you bring them to your house, whenever we do the exchange. So, and I hand you the keys and so forth, and we can do it as a photo op. Well, this happened just the way it happened. So I went over there to meet Chad and Susan, opened up the house, got the key code for taking the lockbox off from the other agent. I was the buyer's agent. And this big white and red Cadillac pulls up, and Susan says, oh, it's mom and dad. So mom gets out. Of course, dad gets out, goes around and opens the door for mom. Very chivalrous man, highly energetic looking.
Sounds like it.
And so mom gets out, and then he opens the back door. Susan's sister gets out, Julie. And then they all come walking up the walk. Mom goes in the door first. She says, hi, I'm Jean. Julie says, hi, I'm Susan's sister, Julie. And then her dad sticks out his hand and said, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Zig Ziglar. So the very first client I had was the oldest daughter of Zig Ziglar and her husband. And after
Didn't know that.
Zig,
Why you just now decided to share this story with me?
Oh, I haven't told you that before?
No. I think this is why I had you on.
So quite honestly, that shocked me. And Zig said, thank you very much for helping my oldest daughter to, keep from being homeless. And he was being, kind of jesting. And I said, it's my pleasure, sir. And so as luck would have it, Zig and I had several interactions one-on-one while he's a well-known author and motivator back in the 70s and early 80s. So
yeah, I think a few people in our audience might have heard of Zig Ziglar, but go ahead.
So, but as luck would have it, I was, single at the time, kind of freewheeling and so forth, living on my own. And Susan's daughter, Julie, was just going through a really bad breakup and a divorce at that time. So we kind of went out and had a couple of light dinners and a few drinks, and Julie and I dated and kind of palled around together for about a year before she ultimately met her soon-to-be husband, and I ultimately met my soon-to-be wife in 1980. But the point of the matter is I wasn't really motivated to make sales as much as I was being a freewheeling expert until I met Zig. Now, Zig said, okay, so he asked me, he says, how many sales have you made? And I said, well, to be honest with you, Mr. Ziegler, this is my first sale. He said, great, superb. So, and they moved in probably early to late April, right before Easter. I remember it was right before Easter. And so I went to Easter service with them at Zig's church, and he gave a sermon. And, you know, as things progressed in our relationship, you know, Zig said, you know, hey, you've got a lot of potential and a lot of talent. But he says, I'm going to just call it the way it is. I think you're lazy. Well, that kind of woke me up. So he says, what you need to do is you need to write down a goal and figure out how many sales you want to make and how much money you want to make and so forth and so on. And I said, yes, sir, so forth, because I'd read his book many, many times, listened to most of his motivational speeches on tape. This was back when we had little cassette tape players, right, and we'd play stuff. And so right after I did that, within the next 90 days, Susan and Chad were my first sale. And the first year I was in the real estate business, I sold, 36 homes. But wow, it was from about May to the end of the year.
Just because you came up with a goal and wrote it down and visualized it.
Yep. And, you know, I had focused. I'd never focused on what I wanted to do. I was just out there having a good time and doing this, that, and the other thing. But I closed 36 transactions. Now, you got to understand, they weren't big. The average sale of a new starter home back in 1978 was between $45,000 and $55,000.
Yeah.
So I was not a multi-million-dollar producer by any stretch. But, you know, also I was very, very blessed that Doris Hager, Tim's mom, kind of semi-adopted me because Tim and I were such good friends. And she gave me a lot of one-on-one personal directions, instructions, taught me how to properly fill out a contract, how to negotiate it, the whole 9 yards, because I was still just a newbie. And the one thing that real estate education doesn't do the way they should do, and they're starting to get into it, is educate new agents, not just on making sales, but how to communicate with people. You know, so because
was that when you were when she was teaching you how to fill out the contract? Was that back with a chisel and hammer, or?
Well,
on bedrock,
the residential contract was a long legal form,
right?
That had carbon paper in it, because this was before NCR paper.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then the first 15 provisions were on the front page. The next 20 provisions and signatures were on the back page. So you had to basically take the form, flip it over, and put the carbon paper in the backside. Then
kind of like the old receipts. You just move the carbon paper into the second.
It was 2 pages, but the print was probably about 6-point type. So you had to have a magnifying glass to read the damn thing.
Right.
But back in those days, you know, here's the situation, much like it's starting to come to full circle now. We had a mortgage officer, maybe in fact we had 3 preferred mortgage officer that would basically, we could call them and have them run over to the office and take a loan app real quick and kind of pre-qualify, not necessarily pre-approve, because that's subject to verification of the information. So before we took anybody out, that's the one valuable thing that Doris taught me. She said, make sure that you know what they can afford, because you don't want to go out here and start showing people Cadillacs and Lincoln Continentals when all they can afford is a Ford Fiesta. And I said, oh, okay, I get it. So that was one of the most valuable lessons she taught me, was to get them pre-qualified or pre-approved by a reputable, trusted local mortgage lender before you ever put them in the car.
And that was even way back in 1978, right?
Yeah. But no,
I think you're still preaching that today, aren't you?
Yep. In fact, I tell everybody that I'm currently affiliated with Champions, as you know, and I've been an instructor with Champions School of Real Estate since 2001. When Rita Santa Maria came to the office I had in Richardson and interviewed me and said, I heard that you are a really good instructor. And I said, well, I don't know why, because I don't have a teacher's degree. I don't have a background in education. And Rita says, that's not what's important. What's important is, can you communicate well and hold the class's attention? Because real estate information is kind of, well, it's kind of redundant, and a lot of times it's pretty dry.
Right.
So unless you've got the ability to hold the class's attention, you're just up there talking, and they're reading, and some of them are paying attention, some of them are asleep, some of them are doing other things. But
and now they're on their phone.
Now they're on their phone. Not in my class.
Oh, not in your class.
So the key is you do the same level of communication and information to your clients. And I think that's probably what I learned was the most valuable thing you can do. Is people are always excited and want to go out and look at houses. They want to do this and do that. But you need to find out who they are, what they really want, and so forth and so on. And I, pardon me if I sound preachy.
No, you're good. Perfect.
To this day, I teach my agents, I said, here's the situation. People don't buy houses from the internet. They don't buy houses, from the World Wide Web. People buy houses from people that they trust.
Right.
So you're going to have to do certain things up front when you're interviewing a potential buyer or a seller to gain their trust. So you don't ever make it about you. You always make it about them. So ask questions, because here's the 4 things that are most important to all buyers and sellers. They buy houses not based on its amenities, how pretty it is, and things like that. That's a big factor. But they buy houses basically that comply with 4 key things. They buy houses for the safety, security, education, and lifestyle choices of their family, period. Now, how are you going to find out those 4 things unless you sit down and talk to them? It's not what they can afford. It's what they really, really want and need. And if you're showing them stuff that basically doesn't qualify for those 4 different things all in one, then you're spinning your wheels, which was why I didn't make many sales the first 3 or 4 months I was in the real estate business, is because it was all about me. It was all about what I wanted to show them, what I thought they needed to look at, things like that. Totally wrong approach.
Right.
So
makes perfect sense.
And you yourself have experienced the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it's so basic and obvious, to people that have been in the industry for an abundance of time. But, one of the commonalities that we, run across when we do podcasts with hundreds of agents across the country that are highly successful. And the commonality is just what you just said, is they, you ask enough questions to find out truly what the client really wants and needs. And more importantly, build a rapport so that they like, know, and trust you. Because like you said, if a client can't trust you and they don't like you, most likely they're not going to do business with you. And more importantly, you're not going to find out what they're not going to open up to you to give you the information that you need so that you can show them the right house for them and their family. So it's just so, I don't know what the word is, but it's like basic 101, right? Where you guys were doing this back in 78 and we're still having these same conversations in 2024. So,
yeah.
So let's talk about this. So you were at ERA, which I know exactly where it is, cause it's literally 7 minutes from my house now.
Yeah.
So you were at ERA for how long? And then when did you go to, what did you do after ERA? Let's talk about that.
So here's what I did is I stayed with ERA because of my loyalty to the
The
Hagers
Hagers.
and the family. And I like the small, shall we say, hands-on approach that office had. That office never grew to a great number of agents because Doris, and her husband Don both believed wasn't quantity that was important. It was the quality and the caliber of the people they had there.
Right.
And we all kind of like treated each other like family. And so there was about 15 agents total. About 8 to 10 of them were in the office almost every day doing something, and we were always discussing things. Of course, it was a different industry back then. There were no cell phones. Hell, well, I tell people, and they think I'm kidding, I said, there weren't even any portable calculators. The calculator you had was this big machine that sat on a desk, weighed about 15 pounds, made a lot of noise. I said, the first
It had
portable
those
calculator,
little
and
paper roll.
I've got it. In fact, I've got the original one that I bought, was when Texas Instruments, which Don was a previous engineer for, rolled out the first, business analyst 2. And so I bought one in 1980 when they first came out, because they developed a microchip in the portable calculators with, an LED screen. And boy, this was like futuristic as hell. And so I think I paid $65 for it. And that was in 1978. Well, it's $1979. And I was so proud of that thing. I would whip it out every time I was trying to do so forth, so on, to prove I was technologically more advanced than a normal agent. So,
Right.
but
Yeah. Credibility.
after I, and while I was there, I met my future wife, a lady that a lot of people's name they still recognize today, Peggy Richey, which was mom to, you and me.
Yep.
And several different rescue animals. And Peggy was the icon. So I moved from ERA to Remax, and Remax at the Promenade Shopping Center, which is a brokerage owned by a guy by the name of Don Dahlberg.
And that's
He was
off,
one of
that's
the
off of
first
Coit.
Remax
That's off of Coit
franchise.
Road, right?
Huh?
That's Promenade is literally off of Coit Road, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, yeah, I still stayed in Richardson because that was the area I was familiar with, the market I knew. And I stayed with Don Dahlberg for about 2.5 years because it was 100% concept. I met a lady who was one of the very first Remax agents to join Remax back in the early 80s by the name of Verna Rhodes, Rhodes, who is the mother of a guy by the name of, her husband also was in the business with her, but he was a home builder in Arlington in the mid cities. And she introduced me to her son, which was a little shaver at that time, a kid by the name of Russell Rhodes. And Russell soon became this mega icon agent, working with his mom, kind of assisting and so forth, and so on. And then, while I was, in the business, I convinced Peggy she was working as a personnel recruiter. I convinced her to get her real estate license because she was a heck of a lot more. She was one of those agents that just fit everything she did, how she did it. She had the discipline. She had the records. She was very meticulous, as you know. And she was a phenomenal real estate agent. She went to work for Don and Doris, and then she didn't want to go to Remax with me. So what she did is she stayed at Don and Doris's office, for I guess about a year and a half, until she realized that basically she needed to expand her vicissitudes because there wasn't enough happening. She joined Debbie Holiday. And so, I was working for one agency, she was working for another, but we were still, communicating husband and wife and so forth. Then all of a sudden, Peggy took advantage of her discipline and her systems, and she became the number one producing agent in the Debbie Holiday office that she was in within her first year. So don't ask me how she did it. I could to this day, she still did things that I wasn't willing to do
Yeah,
maybe
we
that
know
was different.
we know how she did it. She did all the things that we constantly hear that we should do. That no one says, well, that's a great idea, but we don't ever execute it
We never
quite like
implemented.
she did. We don't have the discipline to do it like she did. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know how it goes.
And then
But go ahead.
so she wanted to form a team inside of the Ebby Holiday Richardson office, and her office manager and upper management in Ebby Holiday said, well, you're going to have to pay a desk fee for each one of your licensed assistants, or if you have a showing agent, they have to be under the guidelines and so forth. So she was paying 3 times the number of fees that she should have been paying. And since she was one of the top producing agents with Ebby Holiday, she met this lady at Ebby used to throw these breakfast of champions. Everybody uses the word champions. And Ebby Holiday personally and her vice president, basically would invite everybody to Ebby's home for a sit-down conversation, kind of a formal tea, and a fabulous buffet breakfast. And the top agents from all 21 of her offices would show up. And that's when Peggy met a lady by the name of Jan Richey. Jan, basically what everybody thought Jan was my ex-wife. No, I never was married to Jan Richey.
Right. Yep.
But Jan was part of the Richeys, but I always joked with her. I said, she was part of the rich Richeys that were from up around Tulsa.
Yep.
And I was the poor Richeys in Southwest Oklahoma that were dirt farmers in the Dust Bowl. And she got a big kick out of that. So Peggy and Jan became very, very tight, very good friends. Jan also has this passion for rescuing animals, just like Peggy did. Jan's even got a 25-acre farm north of Frisco that she uses as a rescue center for all of her dogs and donkeys and ponies and animals that would need to be rescued. Well, while Peggy and Jan were in that together, and I remember this, they worked together and they did transactions together. And
so Jan was working. So Jan was working at Ebby Holiday at the time.
Absolutely, she was the number one producing agent at Ebby Holiday, Plano.
Okay, so you had two number one producing agents of their offices. As you like to say, cussing and discussing business and strategies and systems and all that stuff, right? Wow,
exactly.
That's a dynamic duo right there.
Because and they it even went a little bit further than that. They became really close friends, and Peggy would attend some of Jan's rescue banquets and dinners and so forth. And Jan's just all around. Jan and Peggy were so much alike in how they did the business, systems, discipline, what they do when they do it and so forth. Jan, and I don't know if Jan will kill me for telling her this, but she used to tell my agents when I would invite her in to do a class, she says, everybody thinks that I'm rich. I started out rich, and I tell her, and she said, no, that wasn't it at all. She says she was a corporate pilot. A lot of people didn't realize Jan flew Learjets.
Oh, wow. Didn't know
and
that.
Was a corporate private pilot for some of the oil execs in Oklahoma and Dallas. And then she got into the real estate business. And she said, when I got in the real estate business, and she said, I'll be honest with you, I was dead broke. I didn't have any money. I was living in an apartment. And so what I did is I scraped together a membership fee, and I joined, the Prestonwood Country Club, which also had, which was in the area I wanted to focus in as far as sales. And it had all the luxury homes. This is back in the days when Prestonwood was just coming to fruition. They didn't even have all the houses that backed up to the golf course completely built out or developed at that time. But Jan got to know all the builders, all the people, and all the employees at Prestonwood Country Club. And she said, here's what I did for my lead generating activities. I would go have lunch at Prestonwood Country Club every single day. Make sure I entered that everyone, the hostess to the busser who was clearing the dishes, and all those in between knew who I was and what I did.
Right.
And she said, I had no money, so I would always sit down and order the house salad and drink water. She said that lasted about 2 or 3 months. And then all the employees at Prestonwood Country Club, whenever the membership director who was there to sell memberships would parade them through, I would be there having lunch, and they said, oh, well, maybe, have you found a home yet? And I said, no. Well, let me introduce you to Jan Richey. She's one of our members. She's a very successful, real estate practitioner with a company called Ebby Holiday, which is one of the premier agencies in our area. Maybe she can help you. And she says, that's how I developed my business.
Wow.
She says, so whatever you decide to do it with discipline, do it every day, and don't give up on it. And so Peggy and Jan were exactly the same.
Yeah. So let me just touch on that, because we talk about that. I still do coaching, and I get coached, even though I've been in the business for 20 plus years. And I still try to help people. And it's one of the things that my coach constantly brings is like, the difference between the ultra successful people and the not so successful people is the unquenchable desire. And let me reiterate, unquenchable desire to be successful. So think about what you just said. She's sitting at a country club, broke the 10 commandments, drinking water and eating a salad, with still networking. AK, there's a great book out there called Mr. Schmooze.
Yes.
She's Mrs. Schmooze right now. And it doesn't matter who it is, if it's the door worker, the bellhop, the valet, the shoe cleaner, whatever, introducing herself and being friendly and just trying to, provide any assistance or help along the way. And it goes back to let's touch, the sales mentor you first met, Zig Ziglar, back in the day, which is, if you help people get what they want, and inevitably you're going to get what you want.
Exactly.
So the point of, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
these are nuggets of wealth and information that, we didn't just create these like yesterday or the day before. These have been going on since the, late 70s, and it shaped you, and it shaped, two of the most successful realtors that have ever done this. So continue, please.
Well, the basis of that thing is that, they taught me a lot, and I learned more from those two ladies than I ever did, since that period of time, because if it showed me nothing more than the things that you need to do, you need to be consistent. Give it a chance to work. See, one thing that new agents get into this industry, and I know I sit in rooms full of them every week. I just taught another prep class at Champions just this past Monday and Tuesday, and I had 45 people sitting in there. And they come from various and sundry backgrounds, from the military to, newly, divorced wife with 3 kids or something of that nature. And I try to find out as much as I can about them. And I take that, shall we say, podium and platform as an opportunity to kind of drop little pearls of things that I know that really truly work, because I want them all to succeed. Now,
Right.
Unfortunately, all of them won't.
Correct.
But that's because they don't have the discipline, or never have had the discipline, to do the things that basically aren't exciting, but they work.
Right. So all right. So you're still at ERA. Mom's at Ebby Holiday working with Jan Richey.
Yeah.
Talk about what was the next evolution, which led to Mom going to Keller Williams, and how that whole story transpired. Because for the audience, obviously I'm in my 50s. I just learned this story probably not more than, at the very least, a year ago.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind. So, Dad, please tell me the story of how we went from Ebby Holiday, and then this new
To where we went.
real estate company called Keller Williams.
Yeah. Well, it was a really, really weird story. While I was at Remax, I got in with a group of investors and they would buy stuff and want somebody to fix it up. And I, have always been kind of a handy guy, contractor type stuff, anything I needed to do, because the 80s were not the greatest time to be in the real estate business when Paul Volcker, who was the head of the Federal Reserve at the time, took interest rates, long-term interest rates, from 6.5 to 17 in about 12 months.
Okay, stop right there. Say that one more time.
Paul
They took
Volcker,
6.5 to what rate?
6.5 to 17 on a fixed rate
17%,
30-year
folks.
mortgage. So,
And hold on, real quick. So educate the audience. What was the logic at the time behind doing that?
Well, it was because, Jimmy Carter got elected as president. He, blessed the appointment of Paul Volcker, who was an economist, but he was not a financial economist.
Okay.
And it's because we were teetering on the brink of what we call runaway inflation. Housing was becoming less affordable because, quite honestly, it was jumping from the average sales price 65 to almost 75 and so forth and so on. Gas went from, 49 cents a gallon to 89 cents a gallon. We had a gas shortage, all kinds of stuff happened. And so he said, we need to put a head or a cap on this inflation. And so by raising interest rates, we will do exactly that. We'll slow down the dynamics of inflation and so forth and so on. Well, that didn't work out so well for him because it virtually
killed the economy,
the real estate industry, because the people who were living in houses that they had qualified for at, 6.5 to 7, 7.25, they couldn't afford to refinance their own house because they couldn't qualify for the loan.
Right.
At 17%.
Makes
New
perfect
home
sense.
buyers, it was virtually dead. So I started renovating and remodeling houses for people who couldn't afford to sell them. And they said, we'd like to get a newer house, but we don't know what to do because we can't qualify for a new house. And I said, why don't you remodel the one you've got? And they said, good idea.
And what time frame was this? This is the
1981, 82.
Okay.
So what happened is I formed a small renovation and remodeling and construction company, and we did remodels on pre-existing homes, so forth and so on, and was very successful at that. In fact, I was doing more remodeling than I was selling real estate.
Right.
I was referring all of my real estate contacts to guess who?
Peggy Richey.
Lead dog of the team, Peggy Richey.
You're right.
And of course, she would automatically, it was like a sure thing. But I didn't charge a referral fee or anything like that. She would have killed me. So the key thing is this. While I was doing all of this, I was on a remodel. In fact, I got into historical renovation in Lakewood, and also
I may remember a couple of those.
Swiss Avenue. Yeah, you helped me peel paint off. You remember that old plaster house on Lakewood Boulevard where you said, how can you do this every day? So because it was dirty, nasty.
I just remember trying to keep up with I can't remember his name, but was breaking up.
Julio.
Huh? Yeah, Julio was breaking
his
up.
Name was Julio.
Yeah, Julio was breaking up. He was breaking up with a sledgehammer driveways faster than I could carry the freaking concrete to the dumpster, and it was killing me. And I was like, Dad, he's literally going to kill me. But go ahead.
Julio. He was one of the best minimum wage employees I ever had. So not to take anything away from you, son, but I'd go out there and, Julio would take, 5-minute breaks, drink water, cool off, and then hit it again.
Yeah,
and, his lunch break was 15 minutes.
He was the modern day John Henry.
Yeah, I know.
He was a machine. Go ahead.
Well, while I was doing this remodel or renovation, and it was coming up on, I remember distinctly, it was like, Christmas, close to Christmas. Thanksgiving had already come and gone. And, I had a cell phone at the time. Peggy had a cell phone because, this was 1990. We'd gone through several different phases of real estate. It was starting to recover. And so in 1993, things were picking up. Peggy was still number one. Jan was number one. They found a way to sell real estate because they didn't think it was a bad market. They
Right.
didn't listen to all the other crap out there. They said there are people that still need to buy houses and money that we can find to help finance them. So let's keep on going. So, but I remember 2 or 3 days before Christmas in 1993, I guess it was, she calls me and she says, "Hey, be sure and come home. And I'm going to need the truck," because I had a truck and, I always had a bunch of stuff in the back of it. She's, "Be sure and clear out the truck because I'm going to need to move some stuff." And I said, "Okay. So what are you moving?" She says, "I'm moving from Abbey Holiday to this thing." Jan Richey called me and told me about this thing called Keller something. And I don't know anything about it, but I went over there and met with her and Mike Brody. And they sat down and they showed me just that and the other thing, that if I had have done, the $12 million in sales with Keller Williams, I would have netted another $160,000 that I didn't get. I paid to Abbey Holiday.
Wow.
And I went, "Okay. So when are you moving?" She says, "Tonight and tomorrow." This is 2 days before Christmas. So I meet her. We load up all of her stuff, her assistant stuff, things like that. And I haul it over to, I said, "Well, wait a minute. Have this thing? We can't get into the office. You don't have a key." She says, "That's okay. Jan's going to meet me there." And so Jan and her husband, Tom, basically met us at the Keller Williams office at, Preston Road and, Frankfurt, which was the big mothership of all
Right.
KW offices, but not at that time. It only had 18 agents.
So the first Keller Williams office was at Preston and Frankfurt, not Preston and Parker.
No, it was
Okay.
Preston and Frankfurt.
So it's
Because
south
what
of
happened
605. Okay.
is it was one of those situations. Yeah, that's it. It was in that big tall building that was right across from a shopping center and so forth. So it wasn't Park. Park was the Plano office, and it wasn't open yet.
Yeah. No, I know
So,
exactly where it is.
but
Where the
everybody
private
kind
title is right now. Okay.
of that was kind of the nucleus of the KW franchise. And so I said, "So what is this?" And she, she says, "I don't know. It's, it's Keller something, but they give you an automatic 80-20 split, and they only take so much. And if you hit such a level to this," she says, "I don't know. Just Jan, it just made sense to me." And so, you know how Peggy is, and whenever she made up her mind, you're doing it.
Yeah.
So we went over there and went in and started moving stuff into the office that she had selected, which was right next to Jan's. And there was no furniture. There was some cubicles set up, but they didn't have any chairs. They didn't have any tables, this, that, and the other. So Jan and Tom bought a bottle of champagne. And on the day before Christmas Eve, we all sat on the floor and drank champagne with Jan, Peggy, me, and Tom Lamphere, which is Jan's husband, to celebrate Peggy moving over and being, one of the first 20 agents to form Dallas Preston Road Keller Williams. And I swear to God, I said, "Okay, so do you want me to join too?" And Peggy said, "You don't have to, but you can if you want to." So I went on ahead and moved my license over, but I usually just referred all my business to her.
Right.
Because I was too busy building stuff, remodeling stuff, things like that. So
let's talk about that. So Keller Williams, which I guess it started in Austin, correct?
right.
Okay. And so this was his first breaking into a different market was Dallas, correct?
Right. It was their initial concept, Basically, Gary Keller was a great teacher, trainer, and motivator, but he wasn't a great office manager because he had this tendency to be very direct, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So the key is back in that day, we found out, there were several other offices in the state of Texas, and they were starting to expand. Oklahoma, a lady by the name of Mo Anderson opened the first 3 KW franchises in Oklahoma City and its suburbs. And Mo eventually became the president or the CEO of Keller Williams, because she was much more, shall we say, she was like everybody's grandmother that was very patient, very wise, but she ruled with an iron fist.
Right.
So the key thing is Gary Keller made a great decision to hire her, but we didn't know about that at that time. So, in fact, we were a small office. It was owned by one of Gary's top producing agents, Althea Osborne, and her husband, Bob, and they had a son by the name of David. They also had a daughter by the name of Annie, but Annie wasn't in the real estate business. She went and got a law degree and became chief legal advisor to the Keller Williams franchise for about 10 or 15 years. And we got to know all of these people very, very well, because there were less than 1,200 agents in Keller Williams nationwide. In 1993 and 94, we got invited to go to the second Keller Williams family reunion in San Antonio, and we all stayed at the Hilton on the Riverwalk. So Gary Keller made the announcement he was going to appoint Mo Anderson CEO. This is in February of 1994. I don't know if I should tell this or not, but we were a pretty rowdy bunch from Dallas. There was only like 12 of us that went down there, but we had a great time, and we were kind of party hardy. And we got kind of rowdy at Dick's Last Resort down on the Riverwalk. And I think we were the only people that has the distinguished honor of being asked to leave by the manager from Dick's Last Resort, which you know is a pretty rowdy bar.
Right.
Because we were basically, making too much of a ruckus and disturbing some of the other party goers.
Sure.
So we had to leave. But we went to the second family reunion, and Jan and Peggy got some recognition as being top producers from Ebby Holiday. They gave them plaques, and Linda and Jimmy McKissick were the number one producing husband and wife team. They live in Denton, and they sold, I think, $19 million in 1993 to qualify it. Well, Jan sold 21, Peggy sold 12. And so Mike Brody was sitting at the table, and he said, man, these people do not know what's coming, because he knew Jan, he knew Peggy. There were a couple of other ladies sitting at the table that were really top producing agents, but that was the core of the Keller Williams North Texas family.
Sure.
And so that kind of kicked everything off. Oh, by the way, at that second family reunion, the first one was held in Houston, but the second one in San Antonio, there was almost 296 people that attended the Keller Williams family reunion or convention, the second one.
Yeah.
296 people. That's how small KW was. We were kind of the nucleus of everything.
Right.
And of course, now the current CEO of Keller Williams, Mark Willis, he was a team leader of one of Gary Keller's Austin offices. So, it was, we got to meet a lot of the founding influencers of KW at that particular time. And then as we grew within the franchise, we started recruiting agents at Dallas Preston Road all the time, and things went as they went. Peggy was a top producing agent, of course. So was Jan in the Plano office at the Park. And so, in fact, Jan and Tom, with a couple of other investors, built that first office location for Keller Williams Plano. And I think they still are, part owner of the franchise, or, something of that nature. They're still deeply invested and involved in it.
Thank you so much for popping on, Dad. Thanks for the 2 hours you've given us today. Look, as long as I know it took 2 years to get you on here, but it was well worth it.
Okay.
It's not going to take 2 more years, because I'm pinning you down. You're getting back on.
I'll be
here.
more available, I swear.
Yes.
I'm lightening up. I quit building stuff, so I've got a few extra minutes.
Yes,
so.
Good. Well, hey, folks out there that you want to definitely subscribe and like to the Richey Mortgage Team podcast, because you're going to get excellent advice and insight in not only to the real estate world itself, but just living life as well. And so, like and subscribe, to the podcast. And Dad, I know you still do recruiting. So if there's someone out there that said, man, I wish I could just talk to him and just ask him one question, or I want to know who he works for, how do the folks out there find you? What's your contact info?
Okay. So my contact information, and I'll give you my cell phone because I write it on the board every time I teach a champions class. Since I'm located in the New Braunfels, San Antonio market area right now, it's 830-387-9405. That's my cell phone number. You can send me a text. You can call me. The only time I don't really answer it is when I'm doing a podcast or in a class. I usually put my phone on do not disturb, but don't just hang up. Leave me a voicemail or send me a text and let me know who you are, and I'll be happy to get back to you ASAP. My email address is very simple. Gary, G-A-R-Y-D as in Don or dog, Richey, R-I-C-H-E-Y @KW.com. And I'll be glad to help you. I'm still at the Champion School of Real Estate. I teach 4 or 5 classes a week there simply because I have a lot of fun. In fact, I teach a night class in the New Braunfels Four Rivers Association this coming week. So, Perfect. 5 nights in a row. So I'm available. Don't hesitate to call. I'll be happy to talk to you about whatever. If you would like to hear more about our business model, things that we do that most brokers don't do, basically, we do a lot of hands-on mentorship. It's so much so that, if you're brand new to the business, you're scared, you don't know what to say, you get a lead to do a listing, I'll go on the listing presentation with you.
Yeah.
Now, I won't do it for the rest of your life. I'll do it the first 3 or 4 times till you get the hang of it. But at least you don't have to go in there and say, oh, I know I'm going to make a fool of myself. Nobody does that. If your heart's in the right place, you're never foolish. Trust me.
There you go.
That help?
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, as you always say on your voicemail, and I've known this since I was a little kid, when you leave a voicemail and you leave your number, folks, leave it 2 times. Leave it 2 times. Dad always says that. Leave your number 2 times. Well, hey, guys, thanks for joining the Richey Mortgage Team podcast, powered by the Velocity team at Click and Close. Like I said, if you want more wealth of information of stuff like this, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And we're going to come back next week with some more fabulous content. And so until then, thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.